Good morning and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube, just Daf It. Today we're finishing the third parak of Maseches Nazir, Daf Chaf, number 20. A great year for you today by the one, the only, Ben Lang. Give it up, folks. All right, let's get started. A little introduction. We're 4 lines from the top of Chaf and Aleph. Ma'aseh Behilni Amalka. The Gemara says, "Bailu b'shnit made valiba de Beit Shammai, odilma b'shlonit made valiba de Beit Hillel." The Gemara is asking on the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah yesterday recounted that Hilni Amalka, she took a Nazirus when her son returned from war safely for 7 years. Then she made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, so she had to do another 7 years because of Tumas Chutz La'aretz Rabbanon. So according to Beit Hillel, another 7 years, and then she became Tmeya after at the end of that 7 years. So she had another 7 years, in total 21 years. Beit Rabbi Yehuda says 14 years. Now Beit Shammai said their opinion was only 30 days, 7 years, and 30 days. Really, you only have to make up 30 days. You don't have to make up entire years of 7 years. So what Rabbi Yehuda, when he says 14 years, where is he coming from? Does he hold like Beit Shammai? And it's talking about a case where she became Tmeya at the end of those 7 years. Now, it doesn't make sense. Beit Shammai says only 30 days. So what is the Gemara saying over here? So the article has one explanation that according to Beit Shammai, again, only 30 days, Rabbi Yehuda was saying, but at the end of the 30 days, she became Tmeya, so therefore she has to go back to the 7 years because she came, the 30 days is to make it up. And if you're Shomer that Betara, then you don't have to do any more. But if you become Tmeya, then you have to go back to 7 years. It doesn't make any sense to me. The way I understand this part of the Gemara, maybe Rabbi Yehuda holds a different shot in Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai didn't say 30 days. They really said 7 years. You have to make it up 7 years, like Beit Hillel, except that if you became Tmeya at the end of those 7 years, then you'd have to do another 30 days, not another 7 years. Or maybe they just held a different opinion, a different version of history, that exactly like Beit Hillel, but only Amalka didn't become Tmeya at the end of the 7 years, so she only had 14 years. Tashma, so the Gemara tries to bring a proof. Also, La'aretz Horu based in Shtei Nazir O Sheva Shanim Acheros. Right? The Mishnah says they made her another 7 years. If I'm going to explain the way I understand it, it should be 14 years and 30 days because, right, really Beit Shammai has a different version of, Yehuda has a different version of Beit Shammai's opinion. Not 30 days, really I should have to make up 7 years. However, she became Tmeya at the end of the 7 years, so she has to do 14 years plus another 30 days. It only says 14 years. He only said 14 years, not 14 years and 30 days. Tanya Amihachi, the Gemara proves this is true, meaning Rabbi Yehuda is really arguing on Beit Hillel factually. Was it 21 years or 14 years? Yehuda Omer Rabbi Shimon Lezer, Damar Krazos Torahs HaNazir. And the pasuk continues, Ad Yom Malos, it says until fulfilling the Nazir. Torah Amra Kinitma B'Yom Malos, Tein Torahs Nazir. Like we learned, Shita of Rabbi Lezer, Yehuda ascribes to the Shita of Rabbi Lezer that if you become Tameh on the end of your, let's say you have 100 days Nazirus, on the 100th day you become Tameh, you don't make up 100 days, you make up a 30-day period. Here also, at the end of whatever period of Nazirus was, let's say 7 years, become Tameh, you would make up 30 days. You make up 30 days. So obviously you see Rabbi Yehuda holds, right? And Shita Rabbi Lezer, he holds, Rabbi Yehuda himself seems to hold, that if you became Tameh at the end of 7 years, you have to make up 30 days. And that's inconsistent with the Mishnah. The Mishnah says only 14 years. She said 14 years and 30 days. So you see that really, seemingly, it's a machlokas factually. Yehuda held like Beit Hillel. He just held factually she didn't become Tameh at the end of the 7 years. And therefore she only in total had 14 years in the zeros, as opposed to the Tanakama hold Beit Hillel that it was actually 21 years. She did become Tameh and she had to make up another 7 years. The Mishnah says, Mishnah, how you shtei kite edim idos oso. 2 sets of witnesses. It's four witnesses, 2 groups of 2. Elim edim shenazar shtayim. One group of edim say he took two terms in the zeros upon himself. And another two witnesses, they say that he took 5 terms in the zeros upon himself. Beishamai says they're hachasha, they're contradicting each other, these two kitei Eidim, these two groups of Eidim. There's no Naziros. So still omrim yesh b'chal chamish shtayim shein nazir shtayim, right? They do agree because the one who said 5, right, agrees 2 is part of 5. So therefore we accept the Eidos shein nazir shtayim. So therefore the group that says 5 is not really contradicting the one who says 2. They're just adding on. So therefore, at least 2 years, you should become 2 terms, not 2 years, 2 terms in a zeros. Say probably 2 stam zeros, 2 30-day periods of zeros. He has to take one himself. Because at least at 2 they argue. They argue at least 2 they agree. More than 2 is an argument. So there's a chasha, there's a disagreement about more than 2, but at least 2 they agree on. Whereas in the Mishnah, our Mishnah does not follow a different Tana. The Sani, Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan ben Broka Omer. Lo nechleku beishamai sil ashteki de'edim achas Omer shtayim achas Omer chamesh sheish b'chal chamesh shtayim. Even Beishamai agrees that if there's 2 groups of 8, and one says 5 terms in the zeros, one says 2 terms in the zeros, he accepted upon himself. So yesh b'chal masayim mana, yesh b'chal chamesh shtayim. So everyone's agreeing on 2 years, 2 terms in the zeros. I'm saying 2 years, 2 terms on the zeros. And even Beishamai would say that he has to be shomer 2 terms in the zeros. What are the arguments? Al kas achas. Echad omer shtayim, echad omer chamesh. You have one group of eidim. One witness says he heard him b'makabel 2 sets in the zeros, and one aid says he's heard him b'makabel 5 sets in the zeros. Shebeshamai omer nechla idus, and there you have to separate the Eidos. Right? The Eidim say different things. According to Yochanan ben Yochanan ben Broka, Shmuel ben Yochanan ben Broka, he says even if it's one group of Eidim, one Eid says one thing, 5 terms, one says 2 terms in the zeros. They agree on 2 terms. So there's no hachasha, there's no disagreement on 2 terms. So therefore he has to keep 2 terms in the zeros. Amar Rav hakol modim b'mona. Now, this is an opinion of Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan ben Broka. It's not how we paskin. We paskin like the Mishnah. The machlokes is about shteki de'edim, right? But one kind of edim, even Beis Hillel would agree. It's a problem. It's hachasha. We'll explain the machlokes in our Mishnah and Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan ben Broka and why we paskin in our Mishnah that it wouldn't work. So now the Gemara digresses to discuss this opinion, this Tana, Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan ben Broka. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav kol mod b'mona. Rav says everyone agrees, meaning even the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan ben Broka agrees that if he's mona, if he's counting, we'll see in a second what it means to count, right? Then nechleka yiduso, and even Beis Hillel agrees the Eidos is split. So Amalei Rav Chama, Rav Chisa, Rav Chama said to Rav Chisa, my comment, what is Rav saying? One aid, one witness says, he said, I'm being makabel 5 terms in the zeros and not 2 terms. And one aid heard, he said, I'm being makabel 2 terms and specifically not 5 terms. Their statements are contradictory. Of course, there's no naziros. One is saying, I'm being makabel, he heard him saying, I'm being makabel 1 or 2, 1 term in the zeros, 2 terms in the zeros, he's counting. And the other aid heard him counting, I'm being makabel 3 terms in the zeros, 4 terms in the zeros, 5 terms in the zeros. So top of Chafam Beis, halamali. Why would Rav have to say this? Hashtei Shlomar Chamirta Amar Rav Kilto Lo Amar. Right? The fact that he's saying why is this true? He's saying, right? The fact that he said the first aid says 1 or 2, and then the other aid heard him saying 3, 4, or 5, right? He said 3 or 4 or 5 included. He must have heard him saying 1 or 2, and even if he didn't hear him saying 1 or 2, you don't just jump to I'm counting 3 in a 0, 3 terms in the zeros, 4 terms in the zeros, 5 terms in the zeros. Obviously, he included in his count 1 term in the zeros, 2 terms in the zeros. So he started by counting that. So why should there be hachasha? Why should we say the Eidos is contradictory? It should work. So Amri Marava Eina Chashu Amona. So, in fact, in Eretz Yisrael, they said there is no contradiction. And like Rav Chama's opinion, who argues on Rav, Chama argues on Rav, and says that if one aid heard Echad Shtayim, one heard Shalosh Arba Chamesh, that's not considered Hachasha, at least according to the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher Yochanan Broka, and therefore, according to Rav Chama, he would argue on Rav, and would say, in that case, no Hachasha, and you could be mitzvah if the Eidos, and he would have to observe at least 2 terms of Nazirus. Again, this opinion still argues our Mishnah. I'll explain Iyov ben Sion, the Machlokes between the Tanakh and our Mishnah and Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher Yochanan Broka. Hadron Alach Misha Amar concluded the 3rd parak of Masechus Nazir. Let's move on to the 4th parak. Misha Amar Reini Nazir. He says, I'm a Nazir. V'shama Chaveiro v'Amar V'ani. I'm a Nazir. He heard his friend. His friend heard him, and he said, V'ani. And a 3rd person heard and said, V'ani also. Kulam Nazirim, they're all Nazirim. They were all told in Naziris. They make their Naziris dependent on the first Nazir. Hutar Arishon. If the first Nazir is Makabal Naziris, and he went to a beis din, their mater his Naziris. He said, Adaiti the Haki, I didn't know being a Nazir was such a difficult thing. Hutru Kulan, right? Even if the 2nd and 3rd people who depended their Naziris on the first person and still want their Naziris, the Naziris is batal because the Naziris is dependent on the first person's Naziris. Hutar Arishon, Hutar Kulan. Hutar Ha'achron, Mutar V'kulam Asram. However, if the 3rd one is matir and Naziris, the first 2 remain in effect. And if the 2nd one is matir and Naziris, the 2nd and 3rd are Hutar, but the first one remains in effect. The Kulam Asram. Amar Harini Nazir V'shama Chaver. He says, I'm a Nazir. His Chavero heard, his friend heard. Amar Pika Piv. My mouth is like his mouth. Or he says, V'sari Kasari. Sari Kasaro. My hair is like his hair. Hariza Nazir. That's an acceptance of Naziris. Another case. Harini Nazir V'shama Ishto. I'm a Nazir. His wife heard him. Amra Mani. She also wanted to become a Nazira. Mayfair is Shallah V'shalo Kayim. He has the ability as a husband. A Nazir is the type of a Neder. He can Mayfair her Naziras. His he can't, right? You can't be matir your own Nadarim. You can't be made for your own Nadarim, right? Bal Yachal Dvaro, right? Eino Meichal is Atzmo, the Gemara says, right? Acherim Mochlin La, Acherim, a beis din can matir Nadarim, or a husband can make for his wife or his daughter's Nadarim, but he can't be matir his own Nadarim. Harini Nazira. The woman says, the wife says, I'm a Nazira. Shama Bailav Amar Vani, and he agreed to, he also accepted Naziris, dependent on his wife's Naziris. And a Yachal HaHafer, he can't even, in that case, be made for his wife's Naziris. Because if he's made for his wife's Naziris, then automatically, since his Naziris is dependent on his wife's Naziris, he'll be being made for his own Naziris, and you can't be made for or matir your own Nadarim. Hareini Nazir V'at. He says, I'm a Nazir, the man says, and you, meaning, what do you want? My wife, what do you want? He's asking her, Amra Main. She said, Main. Yeah, I'll be a Nazir also. Made for Eshlav Kayim. Again, he can make for hers because hers is dependent on his. He made for her Naziras, he's not being made for his own. V'shalo Kayim. Harini Nazira. If she were to say I'm a Nazira of Ata, and she says, what about you, my husband? You want to join me in becoming a Nazir? Amar Amen. He said, Amen. Eino Yachal HaHafer. He can't be made for than Naziras. Because again, right, by being made for her Naziras, since his Naziris is dependent on hers, he'll be made for his own Naziris, and you can't be made for your own Naziris. The Gemara says, Yasser Reish Lakish Kamei Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya. Reish Lakish sat in front of Yehuda Nasiya. V'Yasser v'Kamar. V'Hu Sheit Fisu Kulam V'Sochidei Dibur. The Mishnah, the first clause in the Mishnah says, someone says, I'm Reini Nazir, and someone hears them and says, Vani, right? And or a 3rd person, he also hears it and says, Vani. They all have to say it. I'm going to translate this according to the Art Scroll. I'm going to talk more about whether I agree with this or disagree with it. They all the 2nd and 3rd person have to accept in the Zeros Tokidei Dibur, which is about 3 seconds. We'll see in a second what Tokidei Dibur is from the original statement of the first Nazir. The Kama Tokidei Dibur. How long is Tokidei Dibur? K'dei Sheila Shalom. Meaning saying Shalom Aleichem. Say the Kama K'dei Sheila Shalom. What is Sheila Shalom referring to? Omer Shalom Tamid L'Rav. The amount of time that a person says Shalom to his Rebbe, which basically is, right, Shalom Alecha Rebbe, right, 3 words, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Amrulay. So when he heard this, he said back to him, Rabbi Yehuda and Sia say back to Reish Lakish, Tuv lo shavak raf l'talmida, right? What happens? A student, he hears his Rebbe become a Nazir, and he wants to become a Nazir, but before he becomes a Nazir, he's gonna have to greet his Rebbe. He's gonna say Shalom Aleichem Rebbe va'ani. By the time he says Shalom Aleichem Rebbe, he can't be makbis. He can't accept the Nazirus, and obviously it's an important thing. We're gonna see sometimes maybe it's a mitzvah to become a Nazir. The Gemara says Tanya Nami Hachi Kafal Benalit Misha Amar Harini Nazir. The Gemara says nonetheless it's a brisa which confirms the opinion of Reish Lakish. Misha Amar Harini Nazir V'Shama Chavero V'Shak Dei Dibur. He heard his friend saying, and he waited to talk to Dibur, Amar Vani, and then he said, Vani, who aser v'chavero mutar? He, the person who said already Nazir, is a Nazir. V'chavero mutar, the person who tried to join his Naziros is mutar. V'kama k'dei Dibur k'dei sheila shalom talmud l'rav. The amount of time it takes to say Shalom Aleichem Rebbe. So not like Yehuda and Sia. We'll continue this discussion, Machlokish, Reish Lakish, and Rabbi Yehuda and Sia tomorrow. I want to talk today in Iyos Ben Sion about Eidos, about testimony over here. There's a clear machlokes in the Mishnah, between the Mishnah and the Tana, Rabbi Shmuel ben Oshri and Broka, in the Shita of Beis Hillel. We have it in the Paskin like Beis Hillel, namely in a case where one aid says one thing and the other aid in one group says another thing. Do we say Yesh B'chal Masai Mana or not? According to the Mishnah, we don't say that. It's Hachasha, and neither of them. I'll explain to you why we say that according to Beis Hillel. Iyos Ben Sion coming up next.